you so much. Okay. So we have 2 verses to follow up on. Really not these are not verses, they just, it's just in the mind of an intellectual that just kind of fiddles around with schematizing things. So here's one that I couldn't remember. Vishesha abhishesha linga matra lingani, linga matra lingani, sorry, alingani, linga matra alingani, guna parvani. So many different ways of thinking about Prakriti. Do you remember before we had the verse? Well, what is Prakriti? It's you can think about it as here. You can think about, what is the scene? The language is the drishyam. So yeah, you can have Purusha Prakriti kind of language. You can have Chit or Achit kind of language. You can use the Sat and the Asat kind of language. Vedanta prefers that. Chit, Vedanta likes the Sat and the Asat, and the Chit and the Achit. Sankhya, gets is more involved with making it clear what the non-self is. Prakriti. So it's the scene. So ultimately, if you just sort of reduce it down to its irreducible ground level, can't reduce it anymore, eternal substratum, what do you have? Prakasha, Kriya, Sthiti, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Shilam. What is its nature? Shila. What is its ultimate nature? Light, activity, and sort of stability, which is these are just synonyms for Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Okay. What else is Prakriti? Well, it's the Bhuta Indriyatma. What is its Atmakam? What is its nature? Shila, what is it made of? Atmaka, what's its nature? Well, think about it. Prakriti is also just the sense objects. We can talk about the world out there. How do we know there's a world out there? Because our senses perceive it. And then from those perceptions, we make inferences. So we infer that there's dark matter because we perceive the universe as evolving out and something's pushing it. It's accelerating. So these are inferences based on perception. So you can say that what is the seen? It is the bhuta, the things that we see. And what else is it? It's the indriyas, the senses through which we see it. The senses through which we see the sense objects. That's its nature. So the senses are the senses, but also the mind is a sense, a sixth sense. It has a special position because it's internal, but it's still dealing with the external. And intelligence is also a kind of a sense. And then we skipped over this verse. So the Sankhya chart, I don't know if Eleonora can bring that up. She sent it to me, and can we put that in the chat, do you think?
Yes, or on the screen.
Yeah, excellent. How would I do that?
You have a chart?
Eleanor, you have to forgive me. I forgot to upload it.
Okay. Give me a minute.
Yeah. So we have this verse. It's just it's just a schematic. You make a schema. It's a sign of an intellectual brain. You divide things you fiddle around with reality and you fit it into boxes. It's a very Sankhya sort of thing to do. And remember, yoga is a branch of Sankhya in its earliest period. It wasn't a separate school. It leaves the schematization up to Sankhya. It accepts it all. Patanjali is much more interested in the mind and conscious and liberation through the process of yoga, Chittavritti Nirodha. Occasionally you have a verse like this. So the Vishesha and the Avishesha Linga matra alingani. What are the guna paravani? What are the kind of stages of the gunas? Why is he talking about stages? Because reality unfolds from subtle to gross. So you have prakriti, then the most subtle thing of all, highly sattvic, is buddhi, intelligence. And then progressively, the tamas element increases. So from buddhi, you have ahankara, and then that ahankara explodes out like the Cambrian fossil record, it explodes out into the 10 the Gyanindriyas, the Gyanindriyas and the Karmendriyas, these are Shaktis. They're not the gross eyeball and the gross limbs. These Indriyas, they're Shaktis, sometimes called pranas. The 10 pranas. I know we'd like to think of 5, but there's 10 in the Sankhya system. Each sense has a very specific kind of prana that somehow sustains it, that empowers it. It's a force. The pranas, the subtle energies, and each sense has one. So those are the 10, and then the manas. And from ahankara, when affected by tamas, we don't have to get into all of this. Come the qualities, the sounds, form, taste, smell. And these are embedded and these are qualities of something. They have to reside in a substance. So the substances are, I guess we would call them irreducible entities. I know we have a periodic table, but the periodic table is in one way reducible than hydrogen, and then helium, and then you add electrons and protons, and you end up with whatever it is in the periodic table. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I went to school, but I remember it sitting on the wall of our chemistry lab. I don't know, it was 180 or 280. We had the periodic table. So, but they're reducible. So Sankhya says, well, there's 5 kinds of subatomic entities, and they call it earth, water, fire, air, ether. That sounds a little primitivistic to us, but we don't know what they mean by that. They might be saying something like the substance is prominent in gas, the substance is prominent in liquid, the subatomic entity is prominent in fire, the subatomic entities. So that's really what they might be saying with these 5 Mahabhutas. So they earth, water, fire, air, ether, but perhaps it's not as primitive as that may sound. Right now, what's school like got to do with this? Well, when we have our chart up, we can have a little look.
I have it, but you have to stop sharing.
So stop sharing, and then go into chat. Oh, okay. Thank you, Eleonora. I hope everybody showers their blessings on Eleonora. They're doing this.
Should I put it in the chat?
See, everybody shower you. You just have to raise your right hand and do this. I'll show you later. So, look. So we have 4 words in this sutra. We have the Vishesha, and those are the gross elements. Vishesha, they are the elements. So on our chart, here it says earth, where it's a space, wind, fire, water, earth, right? You could say solids, liquids, energies, gases. I don't know what you do with space, but something, ether. Well, they decided there isn't any ether. But for a while back there, I think Newton posited there was ether through which sound traveled. But it doesn't matter. So these are the Visheshas. Nothing. Here's the definition: the difference between an avishesha and a vishesha. Okay, let's just quickly we'll go. Well, okay, we'll go back to that in a minute. Visheshas are those things from which nothing further emerges. They're the last stop sign. You see, this is an evolutionary chart. You start with Prakriti, which is really just Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. The first thing that emerges is Buddhi. And from Buddhi, you get this explosion of 16 things. Well, wait, no, this is in the wrong place. In the classical Sankhya, ahankara comes out of buddhi. And from ahankara, yeah, we've got this as it's not the chart that Patanjali is using. He uses another chart. There, there are differences between Sankhya schools. So it doesn't matter. This should be manas over here. Oh, manas is all the way over here. Fine. Doesn't matter, my friends. It really doesn't. So there's your manas. There's the buddhindriyas. There's the karmindriyas. So ahankara. Okay. Now, so from okay. Now, so they're the things which produce which are produced and productive. They produce from something prior to them. They are produced, but from something. They themselves are a product, but they're also productive. So buddhi is a product of prakriti, right? But it also is productive because it creates ahankara in the normal system. And from ahankara then, okay, so ahankara is also produced and productive. From ahankara, you get all these 16 things, manas and the karmindriyas, and here it's called buddhindriyas. You can call it buddhindriyas, jnanindriyas. Don't be confused by this, my friend. There were many, many Sankhya schools. Yeah, no, there was no kind of, there were many different, not major differences, but little differences. So that verse for 19, the things which are produced and productive, they themselves come out of something subtler, and they in turn produce something a little bit grosser than themselves. They're the avisheshas. The things that do not produce anything are the visheshas. They are produced, but not productive. What do we care about this? It's just an intellectualized way of schematizing it. So what is produced but not productive? Well, manas does not produce anything out of itself. The 10 indriyas, buddhindriyas, also known as jnanindriyas, they're produced, but they're not productive. Manas is produced, not productive. And the 5 mahabhutas are produced and not productive. So you have 16 things which are visheshas. They're produced, but not productive. Now, the things which are produced and productive, what are they? Well, buddhi is produced, but it's productive. It came out of prakriti, but out of buddhi comes the all this lot, but slightly different in different charts. Normally, ahankara would be the ahankara comes out of buddhi, and from ahankara you get the 16 things. So buddhi and ahankara and the 5 tanmatras are both produced and productive, and they are called avishesha. That's it. Who gives I'll ask you in 5 minutes what you remembered. Nothing. Ask you tomorrow morning. What was all that about? Can't remember. Is this going to help you get liberation? No. Is this going to be useful at the moment of death? No. Why are we reading it? Because it's in Patanjali. Why has he put it in there? I don't know. But here it is. Verse 19, stuck in there. So those are the 2 of the words in Sutra 19. The other 2 words are the linga and the alinga. Linga means a sign. So buddhi, linga is another term for buddhi, also known as mahat. So linga is a sign. There's no sign of prakriti. Here, Patanjali doesn't use this in this verse. I'm not sure if he uses this in at all, actually. Sankhya uses these terms. Avyakta means not manifest. Vyakta means manifest. So the world is manifest. We see things. So buddhi it has a characteristic. A linga means a sign, a characteristic, a feature. So what's the characteristic of buddhi? Well, intelligence. And, what we're doing now, this is buddhi. The ability to schematize and put things in order. That's one of the functions of buddhi. So it has a linga, it has a sign, it has something distinctive about it. So all of these are a linga, all of these have their characteristics. But Patanjali, when he uses the term Alinga and linga, these are actually synonyms of vyakta and avyakta. Vyakta means manifest, avyakta means unmanifest. So before creation, there's no sign of Prakriti. Nothing has emerged from it. It's just the pure gunas that are in equitension. The word equilibrium is also used, but I think equitension works, is another way of thinking about it, because, equitension means that the creative potential of the rajas has been neutralized by tamas. Okay, that's all it is, my friends. This verse 19. So shall we go back to that? Yeah. And the other verse was just okay, just make sure we got that, right? So we got Vishesha, Avishesha. Vishesha are the end products. They're produced, not productive. There's 16 of them. Mind, 5 karmendriyas, 5 gyanendriyas. Those are the Visheshas. Avisheshas are produced. Everything's produced after the gunas, but they're also productive. They produce something out of themselves. What do I mean by producing something out of themselves? Well, maybe we can think of, let's say, I don't know, ice produces water, produces steam. It's all H2O. So water is produced, and it's productive. It's produced out of, it's a very bad example, but let's just go with it. Water's produced from ice, but it produces steam. So therefore it would be avishesha. Steam, let's say it doesn't produce anything, maybe probably it does, but let's say it doesn't, or unless you want to say, well, it produces energy, fine, then it's produced and productive. But you see the basic point. Something which is produced from something else, but doesn't, nothing comes out of it. It's kind of like the end of the line, like the 5 subatomic particles. I guess if you were going to do this with physics, you would say, I don't know. You would say hydrogen is productive, and it produces helium, and helium is now produced and productive, and so on. You add electrons and neutrons, and each thing is produced and productive. I mean, that's what it is, my friends. I probably didn't do a great job explaining it, and as you can probably tell from the tone of my voice, I'm not thrilled by it. This kind of a verse, but there it is. And the other verse, all I can do is just read it. The 7, where does he talk about the 7 stages? I think it's a little bit further on. And we just, I jumped over it simply because it's just not very useful, but we set ourselves the dharma of doing every single verse. And so we will. We're not going, but I'm not going to get excited about it. 227, right before what is an important verse, and that is let's back up. Right. The whole of the spiritual quest begins with suffering. It's because of suffering, as the Sankhyakarika indicates. Shall we put the Sankhyakarika up for a second, Eleonora? Just the first verse of the Sankhyakarika. It's a really, really important verse. I would have loved for it to have been in Patanjali, actually. Doesn't matter. It's in Sankhya. You have it? Or, by the way, if my internet dies,
Yes, give me a sec.
yeah, if my internet dies, friends, just hang in there. I'll have to come back. It's what should I do?
Wait.
Okay. Okay, we can come. Okay. Right, Sankhyakarika. We just want to go to the first verse. Oh, there we are. It's on account of affliction from threefold miseries. Who remembers where we had the threefold miseries, my friends? Do you remember? The wise, everything is the verse 13, 14, 215. Vivekanaha, sarvam dukam. The wise, even good karma. Remember the good karma? We good jati ayurboga, get a good birth, good lifespan, good quality of life. So jati ayurboga. And they are chlada paritapa punya punya hetutvat. So your jati ayurboga, your birth you take, how long you live it, your lifespan, and your quality of life. Achlada or paritapa, are pleasurable and distressful, and obviously all the shades of grey in between, depending on whether your activities are punya or apunya, pious or unpious. And then, having said that, you might think, oh, great, now I know how the system works. I'll just be pious, I'll be dharmic, and I'll have a jolly good next life. And if I'm suffering in this life, it's because of past deeds. I might have to burn up a bit of leftover baggage, maybe even spill into next life for all I know. And then I'll just be I'll be, clear sailing because I know how the system works. I can work the system. I'll just be pious. And of course, that was the mentality of the Vedic ritualist, of the Vedic citizen, that Krishna is going to critique, not reject, but critique in the Gita. Patanjali critiques. Now, and how does he critique it? Well, in verse 215, Patanjali says, well, the wise, Vivekana, sarvam dukam, even this good celestial birth, it's all suffering. Why? Because it's parinama, it's temporary. And then he says, tapaha, not tapas, tapaha, the threefold miseries. Here it is again, the threefold misery. We don't have the Sanskrit here. So the very first verse, remember the noble truths of Buddhism. The very first truth is sarvam dukam, dukam sarvam. So this is the beginning of a spiritual journey. When we suffer, if our lives are hunky-dory, my friends, why would we want to change? Why, when people are really enjoying, then they don't want to hear about tapas. They don't want to hear about sense control. They don't want to hear about it. Why should they? Things are going well just the way they are. So it's only when suffering strikes, or when we become aware of suffering. Here, let's see how what happened. Let's see how the Sankhyakarika says here. On account of affliction from the threefold misery, remember what they are. Your own body, mind, number one. Everyone's got something going on in their bodies. Even young, healthy, young people. They might have an injury. They might have some defect. Number one. Number two, misery coming from other living entities. Anything from mosquitoes to invading armies, being in Gaza right now, or in, the front lines of Ukraine, or in, or Somalia, or these places where there's horrific suffering. So it could be that kind of suffering from other living entities, or it could be your own loved ones that, like we gave the example last class of your parents might be getting old and there's nothing you can do and they're ebbing away. Your kids might be engaging behavior that causes you distress. So there's the second type of suffering is other living entities. The third would be what we would call environmental, and they would call daiva, the celestial beings controlling things like the weather and so forth. So environmental calamities would be this third. So it's because of the affliction from the threefold miseries, the tapas. I wish we had the Sanskrit, then we'd see the same word. Inquiry should be instituted into the means for its removal. One should inquire, how can I stop suffering? That's the first question, existential question. Why am I suffering? Why am I here only to get old and die? Right. If it be said, now, if it says, if it be said, that's the opposing point of view. Indian philosophy always has the opposing point of view. It's always engaging alternative views. This makes it philosophically rich and not dogmatic and not static, always responding, always in the commentaries of these classical traditions, the opponent's point of view is always introduced, usually quite fairly. It's usually represented well. Occasionally, it's not perfectly represented. So, and how do you know it's an opposing point of view? Because you have something, if it be said that, meaning that now where your opponent says, well, this inquiry into the means for removal is useless. You know, you don't need to study this yoga. Why? Because the existence of evident means. We have evident means. We don't have to. This Shastra is not evident. We don't see souls. We don't see God. We don't perceive the law of karma. We don't perceive any of this stuff. We're just supposed to believe it. It's not evident in the sense that it's, we don't perceive it. So the opponent says, why do we have to, read these texts which give us all of this information that we can't really demonstrate? We have seen means. We have good food that will, this is the materialist. We have good food that will alleviate suffering. We have various kinds of enjoyment. We have ways that you can make money, become rich, and satisfy. So if it be said this useless, meaning the inquiry into truth, Vedanta, and practice of yoga, and Sankhya, the opponent is useless. We have material ways of solving suffering. So now you have to respond. Then we reply. This is classic Indian philosophical exposition. You introduce the opponent and then you respond. If you say that, we say no. We reject your idea that there are material ways of solving suffering. No. Why? Because of the absence of certainty and finality. All your ways are temporary. There's no finality. They don't last. They're not certain. They don't, in other words, all your material ways are not final. They do not produce. They're temporary. They do not produce. It's not a great translation. They do not produce. They only give some temporary little Kodak moments, and then they don't last. So they don't solve the deep level problem of suffering. First verse. So what's the commentary say? Then what is the purport of this? That material ways of solving sufferings don't work because they're not final. They can only temporarily alleviate suffering. Okay, so going back then to our text. Thank you. Then we have, so we start off with suffering, and then Patanjali, remember that whole thing? What is the real cause of suffering? Then it's not lack of material opportunity. It cannot be solved by material tinkering, by taking medicine if you get sick, by getting good food, by sensual indulgences. These things are not final. They don't last. So then Patanjali says the real cause of suffering is the seer and the seen. The samyoga drashtra drishayo. We had the whole thing last class. The coming together of the seer and the seen. And the seen, as we just looked at it, sattva rajas tamas, sense objects. What is the seer? It's just chitti shakti. It's pure consciousness. And then he says, what's the cause of samyoga? Well, the cause of tasya hetu avidya. The cause of samyoga is ignorance. And when ignorance is absent, samyoga is absent. When we get rid of ignorance, and that's why earlier on in the sutras, at the beginning of the kleshas, ignorance is the field of the others. So when ignorance is removed, samyoga abhava, the coming together is removed. And that's Hanam, freedom, the separation, the glue that unites the seer and the seen. It's ignorance. Don't ask where it comes from. It's mysterious. It's eternal. Krishna says it's my Maya. Why? How did it all start? This is where in any attempt to answer that, you're going to run into a stop sign. Materialists would say, well, it starts with Big Bang. Well, why was there a Big Bang? You get us a stop sign. Theists would say it's, one life Christian, Abrahamic one life models would say, well, God wills it so. Why? Yeah, stop sign. Why do people born it? Stop sign. You can't answer. Indians have a slightly, I think, they can wiggle around a bit more by saying, well, you did stuff in the past life, past life, past life. But at some point, well, was there a first life? No. So then the whole thing was beginningless. That doesn't seem very satisfying because we like to think there's cause and effect. And if you say beginningless, you're basically saying there's no initial cause. So that doesn't seem very satisfactory. So you're going to be if you try to sort of probe why it all started, you won't get an answer. But the Buddhist very famously said, well, why waste your time asking a question that your human mind cannot answer? What your human mind can answer is not how it began, but how can I end it? That is that you can get an answer to. Otherwise, if you just want to ask, how did it all start? Well, ask then. You never get an answer. Then what? Well, then just sort of, what are you going to do? Wallow about asking the same question that is answering wallowing around in an unanswerable question. Where's that going to get you? Go ahead, but that's just going to make you miserable, intellectually miserable, existentially miserable. So no answer, my friends. Everything has a stop sign, not meaning that your human intellect cannot penetrate ultimate origins. Any model you have. If you have a materialistic model, you cannot answer the question, well, why was there a Big Bang? What was it? What triggered it? If you are again, I'm repeating myself, Christian model, well, why in one life, why did God create some souls in this condition, other souls in a less pious condition? Can't answer. Inscrutable mind of God. And likewise, the karma model, at least you have a little bit of, okay, I did stuff in a past life. It's a little bit of an explanation, but really you're going to run into the same dead end. You keep going, okay, that will cause that life, and you end up in an unardi, beginningless, which is not very satisfactory either. Okay, so, but you can remove this ignorance. And 25, tadabhavat, when that ignorance is removed, then the samyoga is removed, the samyoga, the coming together. And that's Hanam, my friends, Hanam, Sanskrit. By the way, I put that course up on the Sanskrit course on the website. I took it down because I didn't want to get, kind of, it belongs to Rutgers really, and I could get in trouble. I'm going to take it down again, by the way. And then, and then Wandering Alice, one of our Svadhyaya aficionados, one of the, not a student, we're all students. One of our fellow students, that's what I was trying to say, because I'm also a student. So she, suggested getting a group to get, maybe that I guess she was thinking, I was certainly thinking there'd be a few interested and they could get together and sort of, as I said, you can't get me involved. I'm too busy, academic, and Svadhyaya is a million, and writing a book now, and really intensely into this book, which is just so enlivening, and will be anyway. So so then next thing, we've got like 90 students doing the Sanskrit course. And I'm thinking, oh, well, gosh, I can't just let them all flounder about. So I'm thinking, I'm thinking of doing a Sanskrit Svadhyaya, proper one, like these ones, like this yoga Svadhyaya. Every class every 2 weeks, put it up on the website. I take that one down because that one technically belongs to Rutgers, and then plus there's students on it. I don't know what, it's possible I could get into some sort of trouble. I don't know. So I'm thinking about it, of doing a Sanskrit course. So if you're interested, and it's going to be hard work, my friends, for the rest of this life. I know we all think, oh, I want to learn Sanskrit, and that's a lovely thought. But there's you have to memorize insane amounts of paradigms. What's a paradigm? Nouns decline. We don't have, we lost it all in English, right? We have the book, and the only declension we have is plural, books. right? The Anglo-Saxons, they come over from Germany, right? The Germans have a bit, right? They still have, they have masculine. They still have the three genders, actually, German, and they have a few case endings, right? So the German still has more, but when the Saxons came over here, I don't know, they started drinking British cider and beer, whatever. They got so intoxicated, they lost all of their endings. And now the only one we got left is the S and the plural, books. Well, if you want to do Sanskrit, my friends, you've got not just an S for the plural. Pushtakam, pushtake, pushtakani, pushtakam, pushtake, pushtakani, pushtakena, pushtaka. You've got 9 cases times 3. You got masculine, feminine, neuter, each one, right? And then you have 9. So you have nominative, vocative, accusative, accusative, dative, instrumental, the dative, the ablative, the genitive, the locative. And they all have a different ending on the noun. You have to memorize them all. Now, where you're thinking, oh, that's easy. 9 times 3. Whoa, hang on a minute. You've got different endings for ending nouns. And remember, for masculine, different for feminine, different from neuter. Right, now, then you've got E endings, different, U endings, different, R endings, different. Each one, 9 cases, times 3 genders. Then you've got consonant endings. That's what we're talking about, declension. You're going to be like, thank God those Saxons came over and, just got drunk and they just forgot all of their endings and all they had left was an S for books. So a massive amount of, and verbal, right? We just say, oh, I go, I went, I will go. Yeah, we got a dozen, right? I have gone. Sanskrit's got like 5 past tenses, my friends. Again, and not just singular and plural, we've got singular, dual, and plural. And then you have Atmanipada, Parasmapada, action for originally action for yourself, action for others. So, all of which is to say, eclipse is Latin. Eclipse is Greek. Greek is the closest. So a massive amount of memorization. Very rewarding, my friends. Very rewarding, and you know such satisfaction, and you're engaging the language of the sages, the rishis, and you'll be able to read. I mean, I can't just read it. I have to look up every other. I've been doing this for years, because the other problem is you got a word, but it could mean 9 different things. How do you know which one it is? So then you still have to look words up in the dictionary. But honestly, it's my love, and it's how I started this whole thing in academia. The only reason I did it was I thought, all right, I wasn't planning to become an academic at all. But anyway, so Sanskrit. So I think we're gonna do it. I'm inclined to do it. It's probably going to be like a 40-part course. I'm not talking about 6 or 7 or 8. We're talking about the one that's up there now is about 90. Now, obviously, I'm with the students, and they're interacting. I'm asking them questions, and there's going to be none of that. Each course will be just I'm just going to go over the grammar. That no interaction, and the students will study the chapter before, and then I'll go over the chapter, and that's how it'll be. Otherwise, it'll go on forever. And I think that's how we'll start with you. And then every so often we'll have a period for questions. But before we have that period for questions, the students are going to have to get together on their own. And you'll be surprised how you probably figure a lot of it out. When you run into a problem, and all of you get together, and what you do is your process of elimination. You say, well, it can't be this, it can't be this, it can't be this. But by eliminating, you're going over the things you're eliminating. You're reinforcing. Well, why that samskara of why it can't be this? Why is that ending? Well, it can't be the second person singular, second person. But then you're going over the things that you eliminate. So it's a formidable way of reinforcing the samskaras. So I think we're going to do it. I don't know if any of that made sense, but why not do a Sanskrit clause? The only reason I can do it is because I'm getting another year off next year. I don't know. I managed to pull that one off. But anyway, another year off to finish the book. So I'll have less academic pressure. So anyway, so if that sounds exciting, tomorrow we'll have our first meeting, but we won't start the course until my semester's over, end of April. And it will be like a 15-month course. Sanskrit. Some of us oldie goldies.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that would be your link, your regular link.
Yeah,
This one.
everything's, it would be a Svadhyaya, just like we had Vedanta.
At what time?
We haven't
At what
finished
time tomorrow?
tomorrow, 9 o'clock UK time. Oh, no, if you want to, then if you want to be join it, just send me an email. Alice is going to send me a link.
All right.
Alice, are you there? Wondering, Alice? She said she'll send me a link and I'll just forward it on. Or else I'll just send your email to Alice. Does anyone have Alice's email? Oh, here, someone put the link in the chat. Okay?
She is not here.
Okay. So did Ned just put it there? 5 p.m. EDT. Right. Okay, my friends, let's get back to our sutras. So this verse here, so when ignorance is destroyed, then that's freedom. And how do you get rid of ignorance? Viveka kyatir, aviplava. Not just the odd moment of viveka, discrimination, remember viveka, the discrimination, but aviplava, uninterrupted. And then Patanjali has another one of these verses. This viveka, saptadha pranta bhumihi prajna. This wisdom has saptadha, it's divided into 7. I don't even remember what they are. They just, Vyas lists them. And since we said we'd do every sutra, I'm just going to read them out because they're not something I've ever seen anywhere else. So it's not like a big, yoga thing, this listing of 7. It's not like the yamas and niyams, everybody, the Buddhists have followed, 4 out of the 5. The Jains follow 5 out of the 5. Not like that. This is not a universal kind of these 7 stages. I've never seen them before. But just in the just in the interest of, doing what we set out to do, read every sutra. Here they are. Number 1, that which is to be avoided, suffering is known, and there's nothing further to be known. That's the first. You know the cause of suffering. And Patanjali just told us the cause of suffering is the coming together of the sea of the seed. That's the first of these 7 stages. Second, the causes of the suffering have been completely eradicated. What are they? The kleshas, ignorance and desire. That's the second. The third, Nirodha Samadhi, the Samadhi of Nirodha. And that's it. By Nirodha, the misidentification of Purusha and Buddhi becomes manifest. I mean, it's just going over the yoga philosophy that we know all of these things. I'm putting it, I even wonder, and this is me, by the way, please don't take this seriously. I remember thinking then when I did this book, I don't know, 10 years ago, and even now when I was reviewing it for class, I remember thinking, does Vyas even know what these 7 things are? Is he just making this, is he just sort of throwing something down because he's the commentator and he has to say something? I'm being facetious. Just pretend I didn't say that. But anyway, they're the 7. And then the fourth one. And the means to accomplish this removal of the misidentification has been attained. Okay. And then the 5th one, intelligence has fulfilled its purpose, right? Which is what? Where we had it before. And Vyas all of this is recycled information that he's recycling into these 7 categories. What's the purpose? What's the artha? Bhogapavarga. So he just was repeating it. Up here we had, what's the purpose? Right? What is the scene? It's sattva, rajas, tamas. It is the senses and the sense objects. And what's its artham? It gives you enjoyment or liberation. Prakriti offers you bhoga. It offers you experiences, as long as you think you can find happiness in material experience, then that's what you do. There's no judgment in Patanjali. Gita is a lot more judgmental than the Yoga Sutras. Patanjali doesn't say, he just says, look, this is how it is. You want to seek boga, go ahead. You'll never find satisfaction because it's temporary, because of the threefold suffering. So Vyas just repeats that in number 5. Intelligence has fulfilled its purpose, right? And for the yogi, the purpose is to seek liberation. Who's seeking liberation? Intelligence is. What's intelligence? Prakriti. There's a subtle buddhi made of sattvaguna. It's the sattvaguna. Right, we're on number 5, and you're not going to remember any of this. It's written down in my commentary. Honestly, don't waste time with it, my friends, in my opinion. 6. Now, the yogi's gunas dissolve back into in nirbija samadhi. When you finally get liberated, everything goes back into the gunas. Now, obviously, our bodies go back into the gunas every life, but the mind only goes back to the gunas once. And that's the end of the life when you get liberated. Then not only does your body go back to the gunas, meaning prakriti, as it always does, it always has done every life, the mind does too. Finally, the 7th, these 7 saptadha, 7-fold pranta bhumihi, prajna, insight, 7, can't remember what pranta means. What do I got here? Ultimate. Yeah, pranta. And 7, Purusha, removed from the bonds of the gunas, is now able to shine forth in its own pure, luminous nature. So these 7 stages, nothing new. Everything we just did is just re-schematized for, I don't know, well, I'm not going to say anything. It's re-schematized and placed in this sort of sapta dha, the 7-fold. Okay, so we skip those 2 verses and there you are. Okay, so now the question is, how do we get viveka? It's going to remove avidya. That's going to remove some yoga between the seer and the seen. And that's going to be the only way to ultimately remove suffering. Okay? Remember, yes, last time we go backwards or forwards. We can start at the beginning. We can start forwards. I'm suffering. Why? I ask why. I try to resolve my suffering through known means, by making money, all of the material ways that people think they can remove their suffering. Fail. And then I say, well, what is it then? Why am I suffering? And then we turn to the yoga traditions. They tell us you're suffering because you're embodied. It's embodiment itself. Patanjali says, so why am I suffering? The coming together, the samyoga of the seer and the seen, the drashtadisha. What causes that? Avidya. Remove avidya, no more samyoga, no more suffering. So avidya has to be removed. How do I remove avidya? Viveka, wisdom. Where do I get wisdom? From the 8 limbs of yoga that's we left off. Yoganganushthanad, from practicing the limbs of yoga. Ashuddhikshaye, impurities are destroyed. Jnanadiptir, the light of knowledge. And not would be then opposite negator. No, this is long A. It's got the line on the top. When there's a line on the top, that's a different letter than without the line on the top. It can make a difference, like tapa and tapa. Tapas is what you do. The first word in chapter 2, tapas svadyayeshvari pranidhana, but tapa are the threefold sufferings. Obviously coming from the same root, but don't neglect the difference between a long vowel and a short vowel can be significant. So from following the yoga anga, the anga is a limb. So the body is a ling. Angani is a word in Sanskrit for a beautiful lady. They would say angani, one with beautiful limbs. It's very common in poetic literature and the romantic and love literature. Angani. So anga is a limb. Yog Anga Anushtana. Do you know Anu? We know Anu because the first word of the Yoga Sutras was Anushasana, Hatha Yoga Anushasana. Anu means to continue. So from continually practice the limbs of yoga, Shuddhi is pure, should, Ashuddhi, impurities, kshaye, the destruction of impurities, Jnana Deeptir, the light of Jnana. Jnana is knowledge, but all the way up to Viveka. So we get the Viveka. That's going to remove avidya. That's going to remove some yoga. That's going to remove our suffering. How do we get it? Yog Anga Anushtanad. Following the limbs of yoga. What are these limbs of yoga? Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, Samadhi. And you say, why is it Samadha, Yoho? Sanskrit. It's a plural ending. It's a compound. The last member of the compound, the nouns in the compound do not have case endings. Only the last one does, and therefore it's plural because there's 8 things. So therefore, samadhi in the plural becomes samadhayaha. So this is ashtav, achta, igada, 8, achto, shta. It's all cognate, believe it or not. Ashta in the guttural is still kept in achta in German. Achta, ashta, achta, and then the Saxons came and they dropped the guttural. But it's why do we write 8 in English? Why do we have? Why is it written EIGHT? Anytime there is a silent guttural, put it back in, and you got German. So ekata, achata, ekata, and then it's preserved in writing, but we no longer pronounce it. We say 8. Likewise with Latin, otto, otto, otto in Italian, otto. It's dropped the guttural. But in English, the guttural has been guttural means it comes from down here. Ha, ha. That's a guttural sound. If you're going to learn Sanskrit, you've got to get used to these words: gutturals, palatals, cerebrals, 5 of them. These are all things you're gonna have to learn, my friends. You should do it, but be prepared to work at it. 2 hours a day. You know what that means, my friends. You get your television, you stick it on the front of the driveway with a sign, working order, free, take me home. That's how you do it. Chuck out the telly. And you want your news, you go on your computer, half an hour, CNN, BBC, Guardian News, that's it. You want to learn Sanskrit? Out with the television. And you'd be better off for it in the moment of death. So a lot of memorization, but I'm thinking it's going to keep senility at bay. I'm really serious. We want to be a doddering old fool in old age? Why won't it happen to us? It happens to loads of people. We'd be a doddering old person. Can't remember anything. If you keep your brain active, and they say that, at least you resist dementia, senility. Memorizing. You walk around with little cards. This is how I learn all my languages. Get your little index cards. You write it down. Going for a walk, washing the dishes, brushing your teeth in the bathroom. You got your card there. Pushtakam, pushtake, pushtakani, pushtakam, pushtake, pushtakani, pushtake. And if you sing it, it helps. You sing the paradigms. So the plural of samadhi is samadhayoho. Ashtav Angani. So what are these 8 limbs? Yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana. Okay? Right, so now we go backwards now. Forwards, I'm suffering. Why? Try to solve it. Fail. Then somehow or other, due to the blessings of a great soul, really, it's what it is. I get the seed of knowledge comes in the ear. or through a book into the mind, through the senses. I somehow or other hear the words of a great being or read the words of a great being, and I suddenly get this completely different paradigm. You're suffering because you're embodied, not because you don't have money, not because you don't have objects of the senses. So then that samskara is different, has a shakti, a different shakti, different shaktis. Fire has a shakti, not the same as the shakti of water. So then wisdom shakti, it sits in the brain and nags away. And if for some it's a eureka moment, you embrace it, dive in. For others, yeah, oh, it's a little troubling because all of a sudden all your attachments are threatened. Your attachments are threatened, the yoga tradition says it's all Maya, all of it. It's all illusory. You're going to leave it all. It's going to be ripped away from you. Fake. So it's a bit drastic. So there might be some resistance, but it grows and it grows. And then you begin to see, you know what, I really am suffering. You know what, these attachments really are not bringing me happiness. So it has a Shakti, and it's called, and so therefore, so suffering, and then you're told that there's coming together to see the scene. Cause of that is avidya. Get rid of avidya, you need viveka. To get viveka, you need to do the 8 limbs of yoga. Now we can go the other way. We can say, why am I doing asana? Which most of you are. Then the answer should be, I'm doing asanas as part of the 8 limbs of yoga. Why are you doing the 8 limbs of yoga? Well, because it gives me viveka. What do you want viveka for? Well, it gets rid of avidya. Well, what's the use of that? Well, it breaks the yoga of the sea and the sea. Well, let's just talk. What's that good for? It's the only way of being free of suffering. And okay, I know I'm suffering. So you can go backwards or forwards with this sequence, but try to imbibe it, my friends. Okay. Okay. So now don't know what happened there. Get rid of that. Let's chug along. Now we're on terra firma. We're on, familiar ground here, and let's move along. So the first is the yama. What are the yamas? Ahimsa, my friends, the first one, non-violence. You're not a vegetarian. The yogis should be at the forefront of of compassion for animals, non-violence in body, mind, at all levels. Don't be in words, in deeds, and of course, in physical. What are our beautiful, the creatures on the planet? Why would we want to? Why anybody who has any kind of sattvic resources, any kind of sattvic ability to see commonality, that's a symptom of sattva, to see commonality. Rajas sees difference. And tamas sees only tribalism, doesn't even see difference, just see me, my little tribe, my neighborhood, my little tiny bubble of experience. But sattva sees commonality, not just so therefore you want to be free of sexism and racism and all the isms. Then we have to cultivate sattva, and that has to be extended to other creatures. So ahimsa obviously means vegetarianism, but it means on all levels. Also, not to be cruel with words. I have a slight tendency to be sarcastic, and it's a really deep-rooted samskara. I remember now one of my first memories is kind of teasing my sister. It must be from some past life. It's very hard to shake off, but that's himsa. That's violence. So it could be in words, could be in deeds, could be even thinking. So if you think negative thoughts, it kind of comes out. And if you believe in auras, so ahimsa is the first thing. If you're going to even pretend to be a yogi, non-violence, we have to be really cultivating that. If you're not vegetarians, my friends, come on. By now, with all this stuff about health and the environment and all the reasons to give up meat, but notice that the reasons that we have nowadays are health related. It's good for your health. Not meat is bad for your health. environment, right? Chopping down the rainforest to grow corn and soy for the animals. If you environments getting to Brazil, forests are getting cut down to feed the meat industry. Economic, because for whatever the stats are, right? For one unit of protein that you get from meat, you have to, I don't know what it is, you have to invest 10 units of soy. So it's really not it's not protein effective. If you just fed the world the soy and the corn, you'd get 10 times more, whatever the figures are. So the point I'm making is the arguments for vegetarianism in the modern world tend to be, your health, number one, environmental, number two, we're chopping down our rainforest to feed the cows, and number three, kind of economic. You would solve world hunger if we stopped even minimized our meat. That would freeing up that grain that's feeding the cows, you'd feed the world. So those are the arguments, but notice they're selfish. My health, my environment, the planet I and my grandkids have to inherit. The Indian arguments are compassion, not selfish. Not about me and my health and my environment and my, feed the world. Otherwise, there'll be social unrest and it'll come back and bite me in some sort of way with whatever it is. Displacement of people and all of that. That's going to eventually affect me. Not that selfish reasons. It's compassion. And the Jains they've taken it further than anybody in literary history. The Jains just say, just look at the animals. Don't they suffer just as you suffer? Aren't they happy just like when you're happy? You have a pet. You have pets. Would you be able to cut its throat and look it in the eye? You have where's the disconnect? We have pets and we lavish. They're family members. They sleep with us. They eat when we eat. They have the best chair in the living room. How we know that they're living, loving creatures? Where's the disconnect? We lavish the love on our pets, and we sit down and have a breakfast and dinner. What? That's mad. That's insane. That's incoherent. So the Indian arguments then and the Jains are just magnificent in this regard. They're the ones that they will even sweep the road. I mean, the sort of monastic Jains, the Shvetambaras, they don't want to step on an ant. You could say, well, what's the big deal? There's an ant, not, I don't mean to, but maybe I step on a few ants. Well, from their point of view, it's like just driving on the sidewalk and killing a few people because the traffic's the jam. So I don't mean to, but let me just kill a few people, drive on the sidewalk, and then I can just avoid the traffic jam. What's the big deal? There's millions of people. If you did that, what would happen? You'd be in jail the rest of your life. But that's how the Jain thinks about the ants. What's the difference? There's the body difference. So non-violence, my friends, if you're listening to these lectures or in any way, and you're looking for a place to, your tapas. Tapas is relative to everybody is different. Become a vegetarian. I'm sure most of you are, but if you're not, it's easy. It's like 10% of Britland is a vegetarian already. My dad became a vegetarian. He's a Brit. Tweed jacket, whole thing, Second World War, like bangers and mash, corned beef, his whole life. And he became a vegetarian. And once he became a vegetarian, he couldn't believe it. He told me once, he said, because I was a bit of a fanatic. When I came back from India, I said that he hadn't seen me for 6 years. I said, Dad, I'm not stepping foot in the house if there's corpses in the fridge, right? That was a bit embarrassing. So, right, and so he thought, he was a good, really good dad. And he said to my sister, he was posted in Rome, and he said, okay, let's practice. They went to see me for 6 years. Let's practice. We'll get this practice for a week before he comes, and we'll get rid of all the meats, and we'll practice our vegetarian dishes. So he was, Just, he was a dad. So they did this. And then he told me one time that he walked down the old Rome with the butcher shops, and he walked down the street. And previously he would be, we'd see ham and, and then he said, ham and various kinds of meat, salame and prosciutto. He said, all of a sudden, he walked down that same street, walked down so many times, and he saw corpses. Where before he'd seen, delicacies and this kind of salami and, all this sort of meat and prosciutto, he saw corpses hanging, dead, slaughtered bodies. This is a Brit, never read a yoga text in his life. And he never touched meat again. So, so there's no excuses in the West now for not becoming a bit. There's so many resources are there, my friend. So there is really no point in reading yoga philosophy. And it's not penetrating. It's not penetrate. If it hasn't penetrated enough at this point to make that little tiny little initial step, which anyway you're going to feel so much healthier, open up a whole new world of. I'm pushing this because because animals cannot defend themselves. Everything else is none of my business. You take yoga, don't take yoga. What business is it of mine? But animals cannot speak for themselves. So this is kind of like anti-abolition of slavery. It's a similar kind of thing. In the same language is used actually. The animals are not like us. They don't have souls. There's a book called The Dreaded Comparison, compares the rhetoric of the meat industries with the rhetoric of the slave trade. And you'd find these uncanny parallels in the justification of this type of act, of these two very, these seemingly different kind of attitudes towards the other beings. So my friends, you forgive me if I've taken a little moment, but only because animals cannot speak on their own behalf, someone has to speak for them. Otherwise, the other yamas is none of my business. It's up to you what you do with your lives. Okay. So and notice, however, that it's the first. Yama is the first of the 8 limbs, and the 5 yamas are ahimsa. First things on the list carry the most weight. First things and last things. Okay. So himsa is violence and ahimsa. The second is satyam, truthfulness on all levels. On all levels. And my own teacher he always stressed satyam. The first thing he said to me, satyam, satyam, satyam. I was expecting some esoteric, high philosophical, ooh, Radha Krishna, high level, nothing. Satyam, satyam, satyam. And then it took me a long time to realize how all pervasive satyam is. No chitta chatter. He would never chat. Never. You would say to him, Maharaj. So, you try to say something about the weather. don't. I mean, you wouldn't even reply because he knew it was fake. You say, you're not like the Brits, right? You go down, I'm in Britland right now. You go down and, down the green. Oh, it's a bit cold today, isn't it? It's just a standard greeting. Don't try that with someone that's following Satyam. Okay. So the second then is Satyam. And then Asteya, not stealing. Again, what does that mean? Are we stealing resources? Is our standard of living in the West at the expense of theft? From apply this to our modern moment. We might have to apply it in ways that Patanjali what didn't need to, because it wasn't global capitalism. I mean, obviously there would always have been capitalism. There have been rich merchants. So certainly, capitalism is a form of stealing. You're stealing people's labor. You're stealing resources. So you can extend these principles to address our modern concerns. Brahmacharya, my friends, let's be clear about this. It means celibacy. All right, some people say, well, it means walking in Brahman. Yes, if you're walking in your Brahman, the only way you're walking in Brahman is if you're 100% sattvic, no rajas, no desires, So let's be clear about what it means. But having said that, Guruji Iyengar in one of his books says that brahmacharya means, sexual relationships with your wife. And I always thought, what, that's not, that's not what the tradition says. He's taking some liberty there. He's stretching that. And then I had a student that did an MA thesis and looking at the yamas right throughout all of the Puranas. So looking at the 8 limbs of yoga throughout all of the Puranas to see, some Puranas have 6 limbs. So he wanted to sort of just see how ubiquitously pervasive was the specific schema of the 8 limbs. And in all the references, brahmacharya meant celibacy, but he found two references, and the vast, were millions really, because the Puranas are 400,000 verses. Mahabharata is 100,000. That's 500,000 right there. And then all of the secondary, all the commentaries. I mean, you're talking vast, massive literature. He found 2 references actually in the Puranas, which said what Guruji Iyengar said, that brahmacharya can be extended to a householder, sexual relationships only with the wife. But generally speaking, 95% of the time, brahmacharya means, obviously, if you want to follow yoga, if you want to get all the way to the end, and you want a chittavritti nirodha, is so that you can have a swarupa vastanam experience, then the mind has to be 100% sattvic, no rajas. And obviously sexual desire is the most powerful of all the ragas. So if the mind is, too much troubled by that kind of a raga, then it's not going to be, you're not going to be able to sit and meditate. That's yoga. Now, for those that, and remember, yoga is only a tiny percentage of the population. What's everybody else doing in ancient India? Well, the ideal kind of stages of life are called the ashramas. So this would be the vast majority of the population. Brahmacharya for the first 25 years. So brahmacharya for the yogi means absolute 100%. You have to be ready. But if you don't want to do that, then the option number 2 is you don't want to do the real Patanjalian type of dharma, type of yoga. Then option number 2 is, okay, then you follow the rules of dharma. And actually then, and you can do that in 2 ways. You can either follow the rules of dharma with attachment, in which case if you follow them very well, you make good karma and get a good birth. Remember, Patanjali says, for the wise, it's all suffering, but better you get a good birth than a bad birth. So option number 1 is you do your dharma with attachment, regular. And then option number 2 is you do your dharma with no attachment. That's the karma yoga, which is one of the defining teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. So the Gita is all about action in the world. But you don't give up the action. Patanjali, you give up the action. You pratyahara. By definition, you're inactive. If you want to really go for the goal of it. But Gita says to Arjuna, look, there's 2 types of yoga. There's the inactive one, he calls it Sankhya. And then there is the action yoga, karma yoga, yogi nam, karma yogena yogi nam. Then there is the karma yoga. And what's the karma yoga? You don't give up the action, but you give up the desire for the fruit of action. So you act out of dharma. What's this got to do with brahmacharya? Well, if you're not doing the Patanjali, radical 100%, going for it, which usually is associated with the forest in the narratives and all the stories. In the Mahabharata, when the Pandavas are in the forest, in the Ramayana, when the Sitaram in the forest, in the Puranas, whenever you meet the yogis, where are they? In the forest. So why in the forest? Because they're renouncing the world. They want to get away from distraction. And they're sitting, almost always sitting next to a river and a thatched hut. And those are the yogis. Now, so they renounce the world. Krishna says, that's fine. But he says, Arjuna, that's not for you. I'm going to teach you the path of action. And then you do your Varna ashram. You follow the stages of life. You follow your careers, Varnas. If you're a teacher or a brahmana or an administrator, warrior, kshatriya, you're a merchant, landowner, vaishya, if you're a craftsman or craftswoman, or a artisan, you do all of that professionally, and then you'll have stages of life. There you find brahmacharya only for 25 years. Student life. It was not so different in the West at our grandparents' time. People didn't date. In my dad's time, our grandparents' time, you married. That was it. You didn't. If someone had an affair in the village, there'd be gossip, and it would be, even even in Europe, in villages, there's people. There's money. So in our own Western history, you only have to go back 100 years, and people would have been celibate until they got married. There were no social options. But anyway, so ancient India, brahmacharya 25 years, then you have 25 years of married life, sexually active. And that's called griha stha. Griha is a house, stha, situated in the house, householder. 25 years. And then you have your husband and wife renounce. So that would be between the age of 50 and 75, and the body's getting old and not very attractive. And so the husband and wife, they become a yogi team. It's okay. We did, we married our kids. We did we had our shot at sensual pleasure. We had 25 years to try to enjoy this body. And now as a team, they become celibate again, but remaining a couple. So that's the third phase of life. This is all idealized. Obviously not everybody would have followed it, but it's the ideal. And that would be, and then at the end, the husband and wife separate because you have to break your attachment. I know it sounds cruel, but how about death is cruel? If you want to think of it that way, a yogi doesn't think of it that way. A yogi just thinks, well, death is a good, is a good opportunity for me to really get serious about life, knowing that death is imminent. But if you want to think about cruelty, well, death is going to rip husband and wife apart. That's not an option. So if you're a little bit wise, if death's going to rip you apart, and if you're attached, an attachment's like an anchor, my friend. An anchor can think of even a huge steamer, a huge, great big, boat. One anchor can just stop it. What anchors were invented for. So any desire is an anchor. It grounds us in this world. We come back. You're not going to see your sweetheart next life. That ain't going to happen. Your karma's going to go this way. Your karma's going to go that way. All this idea about, you meet up again. You won't meet up again. The Bhagavata says it's like two blades of straw in an ocean, and the waves just for a second bring them together for 1 second. The next wave thrusts them apart. What's the chance they're going to bump into each other again in the ocean? Two straws. How about almost impossible? So no, that's not what karma says. You're not going to meet your sweetheart again. So that given all that, if that sounds sensible, reasonable, then which it did in the Vedic system, then husband and wife voluntarily at the end, lovingly, voluntarily, look, we're going to die anyway. We're going to have to separate anyway. And let's do it while we still have mental powers. And so that the very last little bit of life, we try to break even our own loving bond. It's going to be broken anyway. We don't get a choice in that. Let's use the last few. Body's finished anyway, useless, can't enjoy it anymore. Just, body's become, not very attractive place to be in. let's spend the last few years fixing our minds on whatever the path is, right? Bhakti on your God, or if you're a jnani, on the Atman. So then the husband goes to a secluded place. The wife goes back to the home. Probably we would say that's sexist nowadays, but I guess the idea was, in the forest, let's say a woman by herself is more vulnerable than a man. Nowadays, we would probably, we might want to push back on that, but that would have been the idea. Okay, so brahmacharya then, with all of this connected to brahmacharya, if you're going to do the path of yoga, non-negotiable. That's rules are different. If you're going to do the path of dharma, which means karma yoga, if you want to do that kind of, then brahmacharya is for 25 years. And then you can enter into the household if again, but again, the rule, still the other rules are the same. You still have to give up desire. I don't think that's easy. It's not a get out of jail card. If you're going to do real karma yoga, you have to be free of all desires. You're doing your duties, even if you're having sex for children. It's a bit Catholic in that sense. You're if you're really, 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 really doing karma yoga, you have to be free of desire. If you're having sex, it's not because of sensual gratification. You're doing it to bring a soul into your jurisdiction. You then you now are a guru if you're doing real karma yoga. You don't just have sex and you want a little baby, cute, no, that's all great. That's all avidya. You think baby's going to give you enjoyment? No, 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 no. If you're doing real karma yoga, then everything has to be done without desire. You're doing it for duty. So you're having a child, you're bringing a soul. You don't know where it's coming from. Well, you know where your babies come from. You think it's your baby? That soul in that baby has had infinite past lives. You know the story of Chitraketu. You know the story of Chitraketu? King Chitraketu, his dharma was a king, and the dharma is you have to have a child because when the kingdom has to go on. If you didn't have a child, it would be like breakdown of democracy for us today. So that was the way of civic order. There was the king, the monarchy. So the king had to have a child. Didn't have a child. Eventually, the sages come down and they say, "Well, what's up? What's up? Why are you whining? Why are you crying?" The king says, "Oh, I'm a king. I have to have a child. No child. Can't have a child." So the sages says, "Okay, we'll give you a benediction, a blessing. You'll have a child, but the child will be the cause of your great happiness and great distress." King didn't hear the last bit. He just said, "I'll give you a child." Oh, yes, yes, yes. Okay. So they gave, some potion to the queen. She gets pregnant, has a child, baby. Oh, joy, 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 happy, 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 sukha, 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 sukha. And we all know what comes after sukha. But so then the co-wives get jealous because now the wives that had the child is now the favorite, and the king is neglecting. So they poison the baby. So the baby dies, and what was sukha before? Dukkha, dukkha, lamenting. Everybody's, king's fainting, and down come the sages, Narad, and the king doesn't even recognize them in his grief. So Narad says, and he was with Angira, two sages. Angira says, "Well, king, we told you that that this child will be the cause of your suffering and your happiness, but then of your suffering." Oh, king didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to hear any jnana. So then the sage says, "Okay, king," because they were his benefactors, they were gurus, and this is the only way they could impart jnana to him. Jnana means knowledge of the self. So they said, "Would you like us to call your son back?" "Oh, yes, 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 yes." So the power of their Shakti of the great sage, that the soul that had left that body, they bring him back into the body. And the child sits up. "Oh, king, queen, oh, child is my son, my son, my son." The baby sits up and looks at him and says, "Who were you?" "Oh, I'm your father, I'm your father." Don't you recognize me? Which father are you? I've had unlimited fathers from beginningless time. Who are you? And what right do you have to interfere with my journey into my next destination? Talking a slap runner. You know, in Italian, we call it un schiaffo di gana. Un schiaffo di gana, a knowledge slap. You know, you get slap of knowledge, of wisdom, like a wake-up call. Who are you? Which father are you? And what right do you have to interfere with my natural journey? So if you believe in reincarnation, my friends, this is what it means. So then the king had his eureka moment. He had his, wisdom slap. He woke up. He realized the illusory nature of family bonds, and he realized who the great, his guru Narad, and he became a great yogi. So therefore, brahmacharya in the regular so if you want to do Patanjali brahmacharya, right, that's it. It's a yama, and he's going to say, look at the next verse. Well, we'll get to it in a minute. There is no exceptions to brahmacharya. If you wish to attain the goal of yoga, look. The next verse. Jati desha kala samaya anavichinaha sarvabhauma mahavratam. These five, I know we've already done three, we'll go back, but these five yamas are the great. It's the only verse in the Yoga Sutra where Patanjali stresses. He never stresses anything. He never is, there's no imperative. I said it before. An imperative is you must do this, thou shalt this, thou shalt not that. There's no orders, there's no judgment. Like as there is in the Gita, Krishna says, the fools think, do not recognize me. Navajanantoma mudha. The mudhas don't reckon. No, none of that in Patanjali. It's just informational. This is yoga. This is what the results. These are the vrittis. These are the states of samadhis. This is how you prepare yourself. Kriyas you do. The Kriya Yoga it removes the kleshas. These are the kleshas. This is the cause of suffering. This is how you remove suffering. These are the 8 limbs. Information. Take it or leave it. This is the only verse where a little bit of stress here. Look, it's the Mahavratam. It is the great vow. And by the way, the yamas, Buddhists have the exact 4 out of the 5. And they have no intoxication instead of the 5th one. We'll go back in a minute. Because, Buddhism the Buddha was a warrior, and probably a lot of his, his followers may have been warriors. The warriors, they drink alcohol in any culture. So maybe he felt he had to put that one in. The Jains have the same 5. So when he says it's sarvabhauma, universal, sarva, like sarvanga, all of it, bhauma, all places, it's the mahavrata, maha, great, maha, like Maharaj. The great vrata, the great vow, and it's sarvabhauma. It is in every place, and it's true. At least in India, it is Jains, Buddhists 4 out of 5, even right-handed tantra. Left-handed tantra is a different thing, but right-handed tantra, 5 yamas. Right. So it is a great, and now and normally if you say sarvabhauma, it's universal. You don't need to qualify that. Why does he qualify it then? Because then you can infer that there would have been people back then who said, well, I'm a warrior. My dharma is to be violent in the appropriate dharmic context if someone's threatening the citizenry, or if I have to enact justice. Someone else might be saying it is the dharma of the householder to have family. It is. Oh, absolutely. A householder must have children, their dharma. So you can imagine there would have been students that were angling for exceptions. And so Patanjali say, fine, then go off and do dharma. Go off and do karma yoga. You want to do this yoga? Mahavratam, great vow, sarvabhauma, universal, anabhichinna. There are no exceptions based on jati or caste. In the Dharma traditions, the warrior is allowed to engage in violence, of course, always governed by codes, just like we have our Geneva Convention. Policemen have their codes of when violence is just not just justified but necessary to protect citizens. So jati, there is a caste, right? We have our police, that's a jati, and our army, that's a jati. There was a warrior of ancient India, jati. So they would be allowed to inflict violence, or the householder has the right to have sexual activity. So okay, desha, country. You cannot say, well, you're India and we're in America, it's different. No. Atman is Atman. Doesn't matter whether it's in an American body or an Indian body. If you want to, Swarupa Vastanam of the Atman, doesn't matter what the body is. You have the Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So your desha, your country is irrelevant. Kala, time. You would say, I remember I was reading this in one of my first workshops with Patricia Walden. That's how I started doing all these yoga workshops. And we were in this monastery somewhere, Bonnet Benedictine monastery. Maybe Lee was there. And anyway, and then someone raised, and it was the owner of the yoga, the Yoga Journal, one of the big yoga magazine, Yoga Journal. He was there, and he says, "Oh, well, we're having a conversation, and we're of the opinion that these yamas are not relevant today anymore. They're fine for ancient India, but now not relevant." And then we read this verse. I said, "Well, actually, read this then. That this is the great vow, universal, no exceptions for your desha, your country, and kala, the time in which you're living in." Bang. And nobody could say anything because here it is in black and white. So there are no exceptions because the Atman is the Atman. It doesn't matter what time, 50,000 BCE or 50,000 years in the future, Atman is still an embodied being trapped by karma and the mind. How does that change? That doesn't change. So your desha, your country, your kala, your time, the jati, your caste, and samaya, that means condition. Well, for example, what's an example of condition? Well, sometimes in Ayurveda promotes vegetarianism, but sometimes it will say for certain conditions, I think it says chicken soup or something, or fish or something, something that a yogi would not consume. And Ayurveda says, well, but not just generally, but for a particular condition. Fine, but not if you want to be a yogi. Samaya, no, Patanjali says, no exception based on condition. No argument. Oh, well, I need vitamin B, B12, and I would try to be a vegetarian, and then I was, anemic, and I'm fine, but no, Patanjali's not having it. Patanjali don't want to hear it. And that's it right here in this verse. Samaya. Okay, so these yamas are the great vow, universal, unavachinaha. They are not to be broken, not to be interrupted, no exceptions made. And he's really specific. He didn't even need to say that. He's already said sarvabhauma, universal. Why does he have to qualify it? You don't qualify things in sutra. Sutra writing have to be minimalistic. You don't repeat yourself. That's not sutra writing. You have to be minimalistic. So if you're repeating yourself, it means you're really stressing something. So Patanjali's pushing these yamas, my friends, and he doesn't push anything. So no exceptions based on your caste, your country you live in, the time that you're living in, and your condition. Okay, so we didn't quite finish them. And what are these yamas? They are non-violence. Vegetarian goes without saying. But, think about, your cutting tongue, sarcasm. I have an awful problem with being sarcastic, and it's awful. And it's so deep-rooted. It's so hard to uproot it, but you have no choice. You have to. So ahimsa, That's truthfulness, again, extended on always, as asteya, and then brahmacharya. And we took that detour because, this is a hard one for most people. And aparigraha is renunciation of possessions, and Buddhism substitutes no intoxication here. But the Jains have the exactly same 5, and right-handed tantra. These are the yamas, okay? And what are the niyamas? Well, we've had 3 of them already. Tapaha. Tapaha means, we have to begin to control the desires. Svadhyaya, we need to, if we're going to, change our minds from the pursuit of desire, well, what are we going to do with our minds? What are we going to think of? Normally we think of, okay, well, if we're working, we're thinking of Friday night, we're going to go out and enjoy. Saturday night, we're thinking of enjoyment. What are we going to have for lunch? What are we doing when we get off from work? What am I going to buy if I go downtown? We're thinking of desires. What are we going to do with the mind then? Well, svadhyaya means you use it for the study of the sacred text. You put that into your mind and cultivate. That's wisdom. You cultivate the teachings. You make them a part of your mind. Your mind is nothing other than what you put into it. Mind is a net. It's called a net, called an arshaya, and it just traps whatever you put in it. So you get to choose what you put through your senses. This is our choice, our freedom. And Ishwar Pranidhana is bhakti, my friends. There is a Bhagavan, almost, all the traditions except Mimamsa. Buddhism doesn't accept a Bhagavan, but they have bodhisattvas, which are quasi godlike figures. Of course, you can become a bodhisattva. In fact, you must become a bodhisattva. So it's not God in a as an eternally distinct, supremely powerful being, as it is in Vedanta, as it is in yoga, and as it is in Nyaya. So Buddhism denies that. But practically speaking, the bodhisattvas kind of fill that role. But obviously, not theologically, it's different. But in practical piety, the great bodhisattvas, you receive prayers, you worship them, all of that. So practically speaking, you can say that they're like placeholders for although and likewise with the jinnas in Jainism. That's why you have temples. You worship the jinnas. So that worship is natural. It's a natural anthropology. Every society practically known to anthropology, which means what? That it's natural, suggests if it is natural that human community is completely separated in space, time, geography, practically every human society. This materialism and atheism is a luxury of a few intellectuals. Atheism is for the most part the luxury of a intellectual mind that is grounded in reason, which is grounded in empiricism, which then is grounded on saying, well, where's this God then, and why is there suffering in the world, and so forth. But it seems to me you could make a case that if every society known practically to you don't have to accept this argument, it's my argument, known to man as some kind of sense of higher beings, then why wouldn't it be natural then? And if it's natural, then there must be something in nature, in the nature of things, that corresponds to that. I mean, it's an argument. I don't know if it's a good argument, but certainly yoga is theistic. That Ishvara, remember, is a special kind of soul, supremely omniscient, never been affected by karmas and kleshas. Okay, so Ishvara Pranidhana means to. And of course, if you want to, and obviously that's so minimalistic, Patanjali has 12 or 20 words on Ishvara. Good luck trying to structure a bhakti path around Patanjali's 10 or 12 or 20 words. No, my friends, you want bhakti, you got to go, not even the Gita. The Gita establishes bhakti as the highest yoga and tells you, fix your mind, fix your mind. It doesn't really tell you how to do that. I mean, 1 or 2 verses, Yat Karoshi, Yadashnasi, offer everything to me, fruit or flower, fine. That's not a massive amount. You got to go to the Puranas if you want to, cultivate a path of bhakti. And my own text is the Bhagavata Purana, but then there's a Shiva Purana, Devi Purana, whatever your form of whatever the form of Ishvara or Ishvari that it appeals or pulls your heart. There's devotional literature describing the activities and the glories and the qualities and the excellences of that form. And then you fall in love, just like anything, like when you fall in love in this world. It's transrational. You fall in love with the form, and if you fall in love with the form, then you read about it. So that what happens if you fall in love? You want to know everything about your beloved. You structure your life to please the beloved, to create a relationship, to sort of create the ideal context for a relationship. Oh, it's no different from Bhagavan. And so you have Krishna Bhakti and Shiva Bhakti and these different forms of bhakti. My friends, I invite you to open your hearts to that, or at least open your minds to it. Now, what are the niyamas? So you got these three. We had Kriya Yoga, Tapas, Svadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana. Okay, so that's the first sutra of this chapter, Kriya Yoga, Tapas, Svadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana. But we got two other ones, not as important as the yamas. Shaucha means cleanliness. Of course, the commentators are going to extend that to cleanliness of the mind and the body and words. And so santosha is not too different, actually, from aparigraha in the yamas, not to covet. That nice Old Testament word, you should not covet thy neighbor's goods. Well, santosha overlaps with that, to be content with what you have. Understand everything is karma. Understand that accumulating doesn't give happiness. Be content. Right, verse 33. Now, what happens? Vitarka bandhane pratipaksha bhavanam. What happens when you're harassed by negative thoughts? He's going to define negative thoughts in the next verse, but it means thoughts opposite the yamas. So the opposite of ahimsa is himsa. So what do you do when thoughts of violence, or, let's say, I want to eat meat because I like the taste. That's a negative thought. Or the opposite of satya is asatya. You want to tell a lie, or maybe sort of bend the truth a little. The opposite of refrainment from stealing is that you take more than you should. The opposite of brahmacharya is karma. Karma, you've all heard of the Kama Sutras. And okay, so these are the opposites. Now, what happens when they harass the mind? Patanjali is quite realistic. He knows that you don't just suddenly break all your old habits. We've had these samskaras and now we want to become yogis. You think the old samskaras just going to lie down and surrender? No, of course they're not. They're going to rise in the mind and they're going to, and that's what tapaha is. First word of the second chapter. You have to push back against them. There's no magic. It's hard work. It's like anything, it's hard work. Getting fit and in shape is hard work. You start jogging, it's hard work. So hard work. So what do you do when you get harassed by the vitarka bandhane? But that's to cognate with bound. What happens when you become bound or troubled by the opposite of the yamas, the vitarka, the negative thoughts? Patanjali says, pratipaksha bhavanam. Consider the consequences. All right? Okay, let's unpack this in the next verse. What are the vitarkas? Himsa, etc. The ahimsa is the yama. The opposite, that's the vitarka, the opposite, himsa, and then etc. What we just did. The opposite of each of the yamas. The opposite of ahimsa is himsa, and we just did it. And the opposite of satya is asatya. So these are the vitarkas. And they can be krita karita anumodita. Whether you do it, you have someone do it for you, or you allow it to take place. Let's take the meat. Krita is you kill the animal. Karita, you don't kill it, you can't do it. Not so many people can. There are some who can, but how many people can look an animal in the eye and cut its throat? Some obviously can, but a lot of people can't. You can ask yourself that question. I'm going to push this a little bit more. How many? I'm not. You answer the question for yourself. Can you look an animal in the eye, stroke its head, and then get out a sharp knife and slit its throat? If you can't do that, what's preventing you? Ask yourself that question. If it's a normal, natural thing to do, what's the problem? Nobody has any qualms about baking a loaf of bread or making a vegetable dish. If you cannot look an animal in the eye and cut its throat, then that's a categorical difference. Well, what is categorically different about it? Well, you know, when you look that animal in the eye, you see it's a fellow being, just like you. It's trusting you. It's looking at you with hoping to get some affection and a tidbit, fine, and a stroke on the head. So, I always say to my students, how many of you can look an animal in the eye and cut its throat? And in a class of 100, I'll have 2, 3 people put their hand up. And I say to them, you know what? I respect you. If you can do that, you're taking responsibility for your actions. I said, the rest of you that couldn't do it, what right do you have to have somebody else do it for you? You got to face that. You got to face that reality. What is it that prevents you from doing that? You got to go there and examine that. Because if it isn't something that's natural, then what's the block? Is it a moral voice? Is it the voice of compassion? And where does compassion come from? Good sattva. What is that? What does that mean? The ability to see me, the sameness. There's something about an animal, even if you don't have any yoga philosophy, there's something about the animal that that is me, that I recognize. That I recognize that the animal, wants to be loved. Like the Jains say, observe. They say observe, just observe. Don't worry, don't look, don't read some fancy philosophy. Look, observe, empirically observe the animals. Do they not want to be loved? Just like we do. Do they not run away when they're threatened? Just like we do. Do they not, fear? Just like we fear. So then they are us. Then they're just like us. And then from that sort of ability to see sameness, from that comes empathy. From that comes compassion. So this verse is saying the vitarkas, whether you do it, cut the throat, karita, you have somebody else do it, or anumodita, you don't do it, you don't have someone else do it, but you let it take place. You allow it to take place. So let's say I don't eat meat. Let's say you say, okay, someone might say, I don't eat meat. I don't, I have someone kill the animal for me, but I let it take. I allow it to take place in my sphere of jurisdiction, which might just be your own household. Oh, I let my kids eat meat, or whatever it is. You have a sphere, a jurisdiction, and you allow it to take place, even though that's your sphere, and you have authority over it. That's what Patanjali is saying. Krita, you do it. Karita, have someone else do it. Anumodita, you permit it to take place. These are the vitarkas. Either any of those 3 levels or types. Now, right now, Lobha, Krodha, Moha. It's quite a long verse. It probably maybe the longest in the sutras. One of them. Right. Lobha, Krodha, Moha, Purvika. It doesn't matter whether, we're focusing on violence because I want to make a point of it, but any of the 5. Any of the 5. The opposite are the vitarkas. So, and it doesn't matter whether it is triggered, the vitarka is triggered by greed, anger, or illusion. Greed, like let's stick with the meat. I just like the taste of meat and I don't want to hear anything that's going to interfere with it. I'm going to switch off because I'm too attached to the taste. That's lobha. Krodha is violence out of anger. And moha is illusion. You think, well, I have a right. Oh, animals don't feel anything. That's moha, illusion. Animals are not like us. So it doesn't matter. Mridu madhya adimata. There's your typical, schema again. It doesn't matter whether it's light, middling, or heavy. These are the vitarkas. The vitarkas, again, are himsa, etc., violence. Whether that violence is you do it, you have it, someone do it for you, or you permit it. Whether that violence is triggered by greed, anger, or illusion. Whether that violence, and the other 4, whether they're light, middle, or strong, they are the vitarkas, right? So he's expanding this first. Vitarka bandhane pratipaksha bhavanam. When our mind is harassed by vitarkas, we think of the consequences. And now he's telling us what we just did, where the vitarkas, being bound by the vitarkas, what are the vitarkas? The opposite of the yamas, himsa. Okay, let me go down here. Violence, etc., whether you do it, have it done, or allow it, whether it's triggered by greed, anger, or illusion, whether it's light, middling, or intense. Right now, what does it mean to consider the consequences if I indulge in them? Dukkha, agyana, anantaphala, iti pratipaksha bhavanam. What is pratipaksha bhavanam? That word comes in verse 33. Look at verse 33. Vitarka bandhane pratipaksha bhavanam. So now in verse number 34, he explains the vitarkas, and then he explains what pratipaksha bhavanam means. So he's explained the vitarkas, we just did it. Now he has to explain what pratipaksha bhavanam means. What does it mean to think of the consequences? Pratipaksha, the consequences, the coming back, the thing that comes back to me if I do this. What is that? What is the consequences? Well, it is iti pratipaksha bhavanam. Iti means thus, this. What is the consequences? Phala, dukkha, agyana, ananta. I'm simply perpetuated endless fruit of suffering and ignorance on myself. If I keep breaking the yamas, I'm making negative karma. It's going to come back to me. I inflict violence on the animal. That violence has to be inflicted on me by the by the law of cause and effect. Whatever that animal suffered, that comes to me. That's dukkha. You know what dukkha means. And agyana is the same as avidya. So if I keep breaking the yamas, I remain in ignorance. I remain, trapped in my body-mind identification. I'll never be able to break that bond and realize that I'm the eternal, beautiful, blissful Atman. So that's the agyana. And phala means the fruit. What is the fruit of the vitarkas? The opposite of the yamas and niyamas. What fruit will come to me if I surrender to the vitarkas, if I don't try to control them, if I obey them? I'll just dukkha, remain in dukkha, suffering, and agyana ananta, and perpetuate my ignorance, birth after birth after birth after birth. Now we have 10 verses which speak of little boons. Some of these are venturing into the realm of mystic powers, which of course is the whole of half of chapter 3. So so each of these, there's 5 yamas, 5 niyamas. But this is another thing. One wonders why Patanjali puts it there. You can only speculate. We can't enter into Patanjali's mind, but presumably he wants to encourage us, to follow these, and so he's providing little side effects. They're not the goal of yoga, but they're little side effects that you accrue. We accrue if we follow the yamas. So he's going to go through them one by one, and he's identifying. There might be more than one side effect for each of these, but he identifies one. So what happens if you ahimsa pratishtayam? When one is situated in non-violence, what happens? What positive benefit accrues? Tatsanidao, in the company of that person, Veda Tyaga. If you're in the company of a saint, non-violent, then that aura of that person, I'm reminded of the auras in medieval Christian art and Byzantine art, and you see in a good museum, your own enmity, your anger, your hostility evaporates. So in other words, if we become totally non-violent, no sarcasm, no judgmentality, then when people come in our association, that's what a saint is. In Sanskrit, that's sant. So coming in the contact of a person who is saintly, your own sattvic potential. Remember, we all have our minds. All minds are made of sattva, rajas, and tamas. All minds are made of sattva, rajas, and tamas. So our same mind can become primarily tamasic, can become primarily rajasic, can become primarily sattvic. We get to create that mind. So if we're in the company of someone that's highly sattvic, that permeates out and it triggers our own sattvic potential, and vice versa. If we can become sattvic, then we will trigger the sattva potential in others. So the way he frames it is, in the presence of one situated in ahimsa, tatsanido, being near that person, vaidacharya, one gives up. Vaida means aggression, enmity. Satya pratishtayam kriya phala shrayatvam. If you're situated the second yama in truthfulness, all he says is your work will bear fruit. You'll have success in action if you're truthful. Now, the commentators do different things. So, when all the commentators translate something very differently, then you could speculate that they are not quite sure what this means, or they just want to milk different meanings. They see what the previous commentator did, and they want to give a little bit of a difference. So one commentator says, if you're really, really truthful, people will trust you. And they trust you, they'll do business with you, or they'll trust you, and then they'll be successful in action because they know this person's not, because we're always suspicious, and am I getting ripped off? But when someone's truthful, everybody knows, it's obvious. So there's just from the aura and the face and the words and the eyes and so forth, then people trust, and therefore you'll have success in action. That's what one commentator says. And there's various other possibilities. So take it or leave it. But if you're truthful, Patanjali says, that's all he says, you'll have success in action. Obviously, that's not the goal of yoga. The goal of yoga is to chitta vritti nirodha, but along the way, it's a nice little thing. Right. Now, what's the third? Okay. Oh, we did that. Oops, we're going the wrong way. Ashteya pratishtayam. When you're situated in non-stealing, again, the commentators don't have a clue what to do with this. Sarva ratna upastanam. All jewels manifest. What does that mean? And this is some of the shortest commentaries in all the commentaries. So you get the sense, what do we do with this one? All jewels manifest. What does that mean? Well, it could mean, if you're detached, people trust you and they know you're not going to rip them off. Maybe they'll, the different commentators will do different things. I can't even remember. Let's have a quick look at my commentary. Where are we? 237. I do remember it being very short. Forgive me if the first commentator simply says that jewels approach the yogi from all directions. Vyas cops out. He doesn't even try explaining it. Vachaspati's commentary is all he says is this verse is easy. Haha, it's so easy, Vachaspati, when you say something. Didn't say anything. Vijnana Bhikshu and the other commentators offer nothing to explain this sutra. And okay, so Hari Harananda, okay, so therefore, do what you want with it. Hari Harananda has something interesting to say if you have a Hari Harananda, but the main commentators give us no, they don't really try to explain it. So we don't need to worry. Now, what happens if you follow celibacy? Brahmacharya pratishtha virya labha. You retain your potency, my friends. In Ayurveda, in the sexual fluids, there is a substance called ojas. And if that's retained, it involutes and it nourishes the finer tissues. I guess it's transported by the subtle nadis, and there's people, some commentators talk about it nourishing the brain tissue. But virya, which is interesting because it's cognate with the word virile, but virile is the opposite in English. When you're virile, it means you're sexually potent, whereas virya labha means you retain that sexual potency. Instead of ejaculating it, you ejaculate, make up a word, you retain it. And there are left-handed tantric, and not, which is not yoga, and it's not Sankhya, and it's not Vedanta, and it's not even right-handed yoga, not even right-handed tantra, but there are left-handed practices which involve sexual activity to agitate I guess the virya, agitate the shaktis and the potency. Ultimately, what you want to do is awaken Kundalini. You want to jumpstart it, and you can do it by mantra, or you can do it. The guru can do a Shakti part on you, or a bestowal of Shakti. So there's various ways that you try to awaken the Kundalini through mantra, through pranayama. But left-handed tantra, you do it, but one of the ways is you generate sexual tension and energy through sexual activity, but then you don't ejaculate. And these are not practices. I'm not an expert on these. I'm not, it's not my field, but you can find out a lot about it. It's like, misunderstood in the West to a great extent. So that sexual energy then is redirected, and that can, according to left-handed techniques, that can awaken the Kundalini, the power of sexual energy generated but not wasted, in the sense of you're not losing it externally to the body. You're redirected internally. So that's right. Left-handed tantra, you can awaken the Kundalini, right? So, but whatever it is, the verse says, following brahmacharya, you labhaha virya, you retain your potency. And what you get from the fifth yama, aparigraha, stadia janma katanta tambodha. Again, the commentators don't explain this. You know about the whereforeness of your life. Some commentators say you get to, if you're really detached, it's not an obvious correlation. I don't think they explain it very well. So you get the impression sometimes these commentators are writing from a place of scholasticism, especially when it comes to some of these mystic powers. But there is this idea that the yogi can access the past life. If the mind becomes very sattvic, all of the samskaras are there. The Buddha claimed that he saw, all his past lives in the second or whenever watch of the night, the first and the second, the 4 watches of the night before he became enlightened. So that claim is pretty ubiquitous in the yoga traditions. And if you accept the past lives, and if you accept that everything's stored in the chitta, then it's not to be surprised. It's not to be a matter of surprise. That if something is there, if the memories are there, then there might be ways of retrieving it, and the yogic ways to make the mind very, very sattvic. Of course, the yogi shouldn't be interested in past lives. Why would you need to be interested in past lives? But, again, there are yogis who are not interested in the Atman, and they do want powers, so it might be of interest to some yogis. But that's what the verse says. If from aparigraha, knowledge of past life, we'll finish up these 10, 5 more. What do you get from cleanliness? Shochat, svanga, jugupsa, parer, atsa. I love this verse. Let's stop here, and I'll make sure that we finish. We're only going to go up to, so we've got to go. We're on 40. We've got to do 12 more, 14 more, 15 more. We can do that. 15 more, and that's chapter 2. And we'll do that final, go back to the normal time, back in the States next Friday. And we will come hell or high water, we're going to finish, because we can't go on forever. How many did we do today? We went up to 28, right? Because we started with the 8 limbs of yoga. And we did 28 to 38, 39. Yeah, we did about 15 today. We did 28 to 42. So we did 14. There's no reason why we can't do 15. And we had so many detours today. All right, my friends. And we're then next week we finish. So if you were interested in Sanskrit tomorrow, Is Alice there? Alice, what I thought.
She was.
Wondering, Alice, do you want to put your if anybody wants to join us tomorrow, should we put your? Here's Alice. Let's pin her. There we are. Thank you so much, Alice, for taking this on. And if anybody wants to join us tomorrow, if you're ready for it, and you're welcome just to sort of, check it out, but just be aware if you really want to learn Sanskrit, it's going to be a massive, calculate the rest of your life and calculate enormous amounts of memorization. You'll get hooked. If you don't tell yourself the story, you can't do it. Anyone can do it. And you'll get hooked. But you need to resolve an intention. I mean, what else are we going to do with our lives, my friends? What else are we going to do with what kind of nonsense are we going to put in our minds? Like, why don't we just learn Sanskrit and, study these beautiful texts and get old with some spiritual elegance and dignity? So anyway, do feel free to join us, and the link is there. Thank you, Alice. All right. I'm really knackered, my friends, as we say on this side of the Atlantic. Has anybody got any quick questions? And I'm losing my voice as well. And we have,
Edwin,
yeah.
you talk about Hari Harananda. Are you talking about a specific sage, or are you talking about just a group of them, or is it who is that?
I love Hari Harananda because he was in the modern period, technically colonial India. So he was in the 1900s. He was kind of modern in that sense, but very completely traditional. He sat in a cave for decades, and even his disciples could only communicate through a hole in the wall of his cave. Some people say he was the last Sankhya-charya. There's a book by an academic about Hari Harananda as the last Sankhya-charya, that there isn't a lineage. Well, maybe there is, but one of the last remaining kind of, there's not, where are the Sankhya lineages? There's tons of Vedanta lineages, there's Nyaya, there's Mimamsas, there's Yoga, even, but there's Sankhya lineage. Anyway, so he was a yogi, and he wrote a commentary in English. And he
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's not the Hari Harananda that was head of the Kriya Yoga International in Florida before this one?
No.
Different one. Yeah,
No,
okay.
He was early 1900s.
Okay, thank you so much.
Now SUNY Press, State University of New York Press, has his translation, but he translates Vyas, which is the main commentator, and then his is completely traditional, but he's closer to our time. So, for example, he might use an example of chloroform. What is it that puts you out to sleep?
Chloroform.
Chloroform.
Forum, F-O-R-M. Well, whatever. So he'll sometimes use an example that's a little bit closer, but he's completely and utterly traditional. So if I recommend his commentary, and also because you get Vyas, he translates Vyas, the original commentator. So Hari Harananda, yeah, I think he's totally paka.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Prashant Ji, boliye.
Namaskaram.
Namaskar.
Thank you so much.
Namaskar.
So question is, in Sadhana Pada we get, Abhyasa Vairagya, and then in chapter 2 we get Tapas Svadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana, and then once again in the Yamas we get Tapas Svadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana. Is it because he's trying to emphasize, or is it because it's in different contexts? Why the repetition? What's your thought on that?
Well, two separate things. The Abhyasa Vairagya of the Samadhi pod is connected to Chittavritti Nirodha. It's not about your lifestyle. In other words, when you're sitting actually doing the Chittavritti Nirodha Abhyasa, you have to do yatna, tatra stito yatna. You have to make an effort to keep the mind in a state of Nirodha. And that effort has to be dirghakala, nirantarya, satkara sevita. It has to be done with no interruption, long time. So that those verses are specifically in the very act of the chitta-vritti nirodha activity. And it has to be Vairagya, and what that means, and then the Paravairagya. Now, Kriya Yoga is, going down a level in terms of your actual kind of lifestyle, not necessarily on the mat when you're actually doing the chitta-vritti nirodha. At other times, you're doing tapaha and you're doing svadhyaya. Obviously, if you're doing svadhyaya, you're not doing chitta-vritti nirodha, because svadhyaya is an aklishta vritti. Aklishta, it's good, right? So therefore, these kriyas are what you do the rest of the time when you're not on the mat. Now, so that was the first part of the question. And the second part, why do you have the Kriya Yoga and then you have them again in Ashtanga Yoga? The commentators kind of don't really go there. Vijnana Bhikshu says, Vijnana Bhikshu says something. He says, well, Patanjali wants to stress them, and that maybe. Academic scholars see that Patanjali, and we know for a fact, if you look at the earlier texts, they were different sort of strands of yoga. So they would have been different systems. And certainly I know the Vishnu Purana has a 6-limb yoga, and then you have the Buddhists, they have their 7 dharanas. Patanjali only has 1 dharana. He has 7 samadhis. So different teachers, there's no pope that's going to get up on the balcony and say, this is what it is for everybody. And so different teachers, just like nowadays we have asana on the high street, and you have you have your Iyengar system, and then you have your Deshikachara system, and you have your Patabi Joy system. And even they have the same teacher, and still you have these 3 systems. So you can imagine in ancient India, differences. So scholars, and I agree with this, see Patanjali as, he's certainly not claiming he's writing something new. He's synthesizing these existing. That's what the sutras are doing. That's what Vedanta Sutra sets out to do, is to systematize, fossilize, preserve. The Kali Yuga is becoming evident. Knowledges are getting lost. People are cheating. So the sages say, we gotta codify this for all eternity. You get the sense of the Kali Yuga, number one, and you also get this threat from Buddhism. That's challenging fundamental principles of Vedanta, like the existence of the Atman. So you see Patanjali is systematizing pre-existing streams, and I see, and the only evidence, the only real place for me anyway, now I'm speaking as an academic scholar now, not as I agree perhaps with the academic point of view here, that there may have been a system that stressed the kriyas, and then another system that was more about the 8 limbs, and he wants to sort of bring it all together. And so, it's a little bit of a awkward melange, it doesn't quite fit, but I think that's an okay explanation. Other than that, the commentators only say, well, Patanjali wants to stress this 3, but it doesn't, that explanation doesn't quite work so well. Yeah, but the abhyasas is a different kind of thing, though. That's what you do for the chitta-vritti nirodha. Kriya is what you do with your body. You study, you Ishvara pranidhana. The 8 limbs are asana. These are different kinds of things. Thank you. Himadri.
Hi, Edwin, I have a
Hi.
quick question.
Yeah.
I know the text does not really mention it explicitly, and there has always been an ongoing debate about where to put eggs in terms of, whether it's vegetarian or non-vegetarian. So I was curious to know your perspective from a yoga text point of view, if having eggs would be considered in vegetarianism or non-vegetarianism.
Well, the yogis, all don't eat eggs. And now, if the question is, where do we find that in the Shastra? I don't think you find it in the Shastra, because it's just a given. You don't have to say, it's a given you don't eat eggs. Now, eggs is a sort of, the thing about eggs is, okay, you're not killing, but it's kind of like almost like a miscarriage. It's kind of like, has all the ingredients of a chicken almost. So it's meat-like, but it just hasn't fertilized and therefore hasn't sort of, become a chicken. But from a sattva point of view, there's two different things now. So you're not breaking the rule of himsa because you're not killing. So therefore, from an ahimsa point of view, one could make a case, well, you're not killing, but from a sattva point of view, it's not sattvic because it has all the ingredients of the chicken. It just hasn't been, it's kind of like eating a miscarriage, basically, or something like that. So therefore, from a sattvic point of view, eggs are not they're tamasic. So, but they're not quite in the same category as, killing a chicken, certainly. But yogis, there's no question. I mean, even today, anyone that's a yogi, they wouldn't. I mean, the traditional yogis, traditional Vedantins, people in the, Rishikesh and all of that, the Vrindavan, they don't eat eggs. So, but if you're looking for, I know in the commentaries, modern commentaries, you might find it. People like Shivananda, but I can't think of a place in the classical Sanskrit tradition that says don't eat eggs, and I just assume that's because it's a given. That's my assumption, and that is based on the fact that nobody does. The real, traditional, they don't eat eggs, and it would be considered very, tamasic. So that I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's the best I can do.
I think it is great. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And Neela.
Dr. Bryant,
Yes.
thank you for this nice talk. I have two questions. One is a lot of medical research being done on animals.
Yeah.
And, even though we don't kill the animals, if we take the medicines that have been made by,
Yeah.
so are we doing really anumodana, or are we really in that way, are we really incurring the karma? So number one.
Yeah.
And the second question, which kind of carrying over to that egg question, is now they also are talking about making the meat out of stem cells
Yeah.
and not necessarily killing the animals. Again, maybe the answer might be that it is not a sattvic food.
Yeah, I think
but
so.
I just wanted, to kind of.
I mean, obviously, that's not something you're going to find in the Shastra. So
No, we are not doing right.
So exactly. So we have to take the jnana from the Shastra, and then we have to make an inference. Well, had the rishis confronted this situation, what would they have done? And we have to use the jnana principles. And I think you gave the answer right there. It will be tamasic. Now, the medicine is, I think there's some karmic implication. We're born in the Kali Yuga, for a reason. We're not born in the Satya Yuga. We're born in the Kali Yuga. So just being in this yuga, our economies, everything is based on himsa to other castes, to other communities. So we are just taking birth in this not very auspicious time, and even by existing, where it seems we are absorbing more karma. So we have to be extra active in our yoga, and just to sort of push back on just even simple things like taking medicine. Where does our milk come from? If you do take, vegans obviously don't take milk products. Again, that's not something the rishis would, because they would encourage milk consumption. So yeah, we are just being alive. We are incurring karma. I don't see any way around that. So we just have to be really, we have to counter it with yeah.
And like being in medical field, we end up oftentimes doing harm to the animals, but it is with a intention, but meaning advancing the medical science, but we are still killing the animals. So it's always been bothering me, in terms of the karmic consequences of that.
It's a Kali Yuga. We, instead of taking natural medicines, also because of our lifestyles, we are getting diseases that didn't exist before. They're tamasic diseases that come from whatever they come from pesticides in the food, from the pollution in the air. This is the Kali Yuga, and therefore our medicinal systems are aggressive and so forth. So I mean, I'm a bhakta, and if you're a bhakta, then you just offer it to Bhagavan, and you just say, Bhagavan, look, I understand there's all kinds of karmic. You please accept my work. I'm trying to, it within this context of the Kali Yuga. This is our medicine system. Ayurveda is not necessarily useful for certain kinds of Kali Yuga diseases. Like our viruses and AIDS and so forth. And therefore we doing some violence there, but if you're a bhakta, you offer to Bhagavan. If you're not a bhakta, then you simply do it as dharma. That's the dharma of this day and age. There may be some tinge by tamas, but it's still the dharma, and you somehow try to do it without attachment. I mean, what you have to do,
Yes.
We've taken birth in this age. This is our karma. And this is part of the repercussion of that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
That's, I don't know if that's a good answer, but I don't have anything else to say.
No,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
It's a issue that we have to confront. Thank you.
Yeah. Ayurveda, all of the, when coronavirus was there and tens of thousands of people dying, what are you going to do? Send them to the Ayurvedic doctor to take some turmeric and ginger chai? I mean, how's that going to, it's a Kali Yuga disease and it needs a Kali Yuga remedy. Are you going to let them die? So the Dharma is tinged, like everything is tinged with tamas, but we have no choice.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, friends. I, bid you all good night, and we will finish one more time. And Jai Sri Radhe Shyam.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Good night.
Edwin.
Thank you so much.
Good night. I'm going to stop recording and just see if there's any.